right, cut the music.
The pomp and circumstance is here.
That's right. Because I told you. Been doing it for years. And it happened, ladies and gentlemen. AEW recorded higher numbers than Raw or SmackDown. Eat it. Now, it's only one demographic, but...
Well, the demo god has spoken.
Yes. Speaking of the demo god.
What a clown show.
How quickly, though, how absolutely quickly does Pro Wrestling Tees get these shirts out? Because you can now go buy a demo god t-shirt.
Well, that is... If that's not the way to open a show, well, God, I don't know how.
Oh, yeah. So, and let me just do it the right way. I told each and every one of you stupid little bobbleheads.
Oh, boy.
That's better.
There we go.
That's better.
There we
go. WWE bobbleheads. I told you. You didn't want to listen.
We're live right here. PW247radio.com. C2CRadioshow.com. Corner to Corner is on the air. Myself, Stan Grubb, Brian Taylor. We will be joined tonight, Brian, by the creator of the one true independent wrestling project. When it comes to wrestling comics, this guy's got it down pat. Michael Kingston is going to join us tonight. And it's true. You heard Brian. The bobbleheads were wrong, according to Brian. I don't know if
they're wrong.
Bobbleheads
for one night.
For one night only.
For
Maybe.
One night. Listen,
Possibly.
If we can have this one time at band camp, we can have 1 week of AEW. You know what I'm saying?
Let's call it what it was. I mean, the match between Donovan Dijakovic, excuse me. I still think that's a stupid change of his name. Dijakovic and Karrion Kross, while it was okay, wasn't a bad match. Definitely wasn't going to compete with AEW's main event, which was the Butcher and the Blade and the Young Bucks in a Falls Count Anywhere street fight.
Well, yeah, but see, that's not true, because I think for the first few minutes of both matches, it was going to compete.
Really?
Yes. And then everybody came to their senses. Those little springy necks stopped bobbling, and they said, oh, let me go watch the Young Bucks. Yeah, spring necks. Let me go watch the Young Bucks versus the Butcher and the Blade, who, in the last 5 minutes, recorded over 1 million hits, views, whatever you want to call it, channel changes, whatever. Over 1 million.
I'm happy for them because, first off, 1 million viewers watching your product is a huge success for AEW. Their first time at 1 million was their debut. When we were there. We were there live.
Yes.
And we got to witness history being made. And, hey, this past Wednesday, we witnessed it again as AEW would hit the 1 million viewer mark. And it is a great success. I mean, you can be a big fan of NXT. You can be a big fan of AEW. We'll talk about that debate that I saw on Twitter earlier today. We'll talk about that later. But you can be a big fan of both, but you'd be foolish to not recognize that AEW has literally, they have their finger on the pulse of the wrestling community right now. And this is very similar to how it was. This is probably as close as we'll ever get to how it was during the Monday Night War, I think.
Oh, you mean on Wednesday?
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever see that truly rekindled, but this past Wednesday is probably the closest because I happen to agree with you. The beginning of both matches was a great start, and it seemed like Dijakovic and Karrion Kross was going to be a very competitive match. But I think within the first 3 or 4 minutes, you did get that story like, no, Karrion Kross is going to beat the piss out of this guy. And once you knew it was going to end in quote-unquote a bloodbath, you knew that the Bucks and the Butcher and the Blade was going to be doing something a little bit special. Time to change channel, which is what everybody did.
Right. Yeah, so what's cool for me, right, in that whole main event thing
Mm-hmm.
is, you know, I'm a fan of the Bucks.
Yep.
I've been a fan of the Bucks for quite a long time. Maybe not like you know, when they when they were in Impact originally.
Oh, you're not a Generation Me fan. Okay.
Yeah. So it took a while for them to grow on me, but I'm a huge Bucks fan. I have been for years. Ad nauseum, I tout them and how good they are. You know, a lot of people don't get into them. You know, but I'm a huge Bucks fan, and the cool thing is, lately I've become a very big Butcher and the Blade fan, and I don't know what it is, because they're not the smoothest of wrestlers, right? Because I think Butcher's only been at this maybe 4 or 5 years. So, but you know, sometimes there's, you know, when they get in there, they're not that smooth, but for whatever reason, I'm just starting to grow on them. And it was really cool for me to see my favorite tag team in the Young Bucks and my favorite up-and-coming tag team in the Butcher and the Blade go at it and actually hit 1 million by the time it was done.
You know, the thing that bothered me the most, and you remember when the Butcher and Blade first debuted, I was pissed because they were just getting buried. Very much like the Dark Order. They were just losing every single week. And I'm like, come on. You brought this tag team in. You've touted them as successes, and they're losing to everybody. And then finally we get this matchup, that big 8-man tag where the Butcher and the Blade and the Lucha Brothers take on the Bucks and FTR. And it's like, wow. Finally you get a glimpse of what these guys are really capable of. Then we have this street fight, which... you know, first off, the Butcher and the Blade are tough guys. You know that. And they're, I agree, they're a little rough around the edges, but they're getting better every time. And we finally saw something out of the Bucks that I think even non-Young Bucks fans would agree that we saw, well, they have grit. They have the ability to get a little dirty and to mix it up. They have their high spots, which, you know, of course, you're going to do that. It's the Bucks. But you had something in this fight that said these guys legitimately are fighting for their lives, and you were able to suspend disbelief for as long as you needed.
Right. Yeah, and again, this isn't the most technical match in the world, right?
Right.
But you can actually, if you watch it, you can actually see growth in this match. To me, you know, you can see this is one of those matches where you can see, well, this is what they're going to look like 6 months down the road in the Butcher and the Blade.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? This is one of these matches where they hit a new plateau, right? So now they were good enough to go with the Young Bucks in this match, and now the pressure's on because they did get 1 million people watching them. And now they've hit a new level, right? So now they have to keep moving and improving, and you know that's what I think AEW does better than any other fed out there right now. Is they allow you to reach this area, and then they allow you to continue to move forward.
Well, and that's just it. Like, with what we saw with the buildup of the Butcher and Blade to this matchup, we finally got a chance to see, okay, these guys can be trusted. Like, you could see there was a sense of faith that was given to them to work in their style. And, I mean, how about the setup? I mean, they had the Butcher, you know, carving off, you know, planks of steak, you know, flakes of meat, and they're throwing slabs of steak at each other when they're fighting, which was actually really funny. I just really liked how they handled it.
Yeah, and see the other thing too that like the Butcher and the Blade. So they were in Impact. Now I don't remember if they went by the same name or not, but they were in Impact for a little while, and they had the Bunny or Allie with them. Right. And so then they come here, and she's part of them, right? And so she's almost like, you know, she's almost, how do I put this right? So to me, she's almost like a piece that you needed for them when they come in, right? And not like eye candy or anything like that. She's just, the topping on the cake, if you will, But now, flash forward to today or Wednesday, and you haven't seen her with them in quite a while. And now it's like, well, now they're showing they're coming into their own as far as like they're becoming a more violent, brutal type tag team that doesn't need that.
Right. There's no conversation required for what they do. It's very short, very sweet, and to the point.
Yeah, and you don't need that, and I like that they've grown so much as a tag team that at first you kind of needed that, and then now you don't, because now their characters have grown to a certain point, and I enjoy them. I really do. I'm really starting to like the Butcher and the Blade.
I just am glad to see finally some progress. I get tired of we got a brand new team, they're really dominant, and you're going to lose for like 8 weeks. Just hang out in the back. There's catering there. Get yourself some spray tan. You'll be good. 8 weeks later, finally, we have something to be happy about because, they get involved. And I know it's hard because Tony and the bunch are all trying to juggle. And there's a lot of talent there, a lot of people to talk about. So it's not exactly like it's an easy task. But we're going to put a pin in that because coming up here in a couple minutes, Brian, we have a guy that is a longtime friend of the show, friend of mine, who has been busting his ass just on a daily basis for a comic that has, the guy's been doing work since 2008 on this comic. Headlocked Comics started off as an independent, very, very brand new, 30-page paperback of just comic book goodness, right? So you had the story of Mike Hartman and his journey to becoming a professional wrestler. And along the way, he gets the attention of guys like CM Punk, of Colt Cabana, of John Morrison, of Ric Flair, Kenny Omega, of course the Young Bucks, Cody Rhodes, Mick Foley, just to name a few. If I was really to name drop every single talent this guy's come into contact with, it would take me a good 5 or 6 minutes more to really build him up properly. But he's got a Kickstarter campaign going on right now. He has been doing some really great work. And I told him a few weeks ago and a few days ago, if I could help in any way, I'd love to do it because he's just a good guy. And he's just a down-to-earth wrestling fan that just wants to bring his product to us, to wrestling fans. So in a couple seconds here, we're going to bring him on. Michael Kingston, the creator of Headlocked Comic. He's going to be joining us to talk about the comic, about his Headlocked campaign on Kickstarter, talking about a lot of what he's been up to in the past year or so. How has he been handling the COVID-19 pandemic? Because it's brutal for budding artists. And I got to know just how he's been able to really to bide his time, because what a guy and what a hard worker. I'm going to bring him in right now. We're going to be joined in just a moment by the magic of Skype. I'm going to thank the folks over at Skype. And today it's
lifesaver.
Today it's working, Brian. Skype is working today. Don't tell Skype that.
Skype's working.
Don't tell Skype this, but all right. I'm just making sure we're meeting our clock here. Little pomp and circumstance. I should have played the Macho Man theme for this guy. That's what I should have done.
Yeah, I guess I ruined it with the hijinks.
We're going to bring him on board here. Always takes a moment. Got to get these folks to say hello. And there he is. Ladies and gentlemen, it's myself, Stan Grubb, Brian Taylor with Corner to Corner Wrestling Radio. We are happy to bring you Mr. Michael Kingston with Headlocked Comic. Mr. Kingston, long time no see, sir.
How we doing?
I'm great, man. How about you? How exhausted are you?
Always exhausted. Today's been a little bit of an emotionally exhausting day, just because this would have been the last day of San Diego Comic-Con, and it just kind of bums me out. Like, the show would have ended about 45 minutes ago. I'd probably still be breaking down my booth and all of that. So it's unfortunate, I miss it, but.
Well, and that's got to be the challenge for you, because I know that you are consistently busting your ass just to get everything done. I mean, this time of year is traditionally the busiest for you. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Usually the two times that are really heavy for me are like March and April, like around WrestleMania, and there's a lot of early conventions that are heavy, and then the summertime, usually July. Well, really from July to New York Comic Con, which is Columbus Day weekend. So those are gets a little heavy.
So why don't we do this? We're going to go backwards to go forward here. If you could take our listeners and I know you know the routine. It shouldn't be a new thing, but tell the fans and the listeners here about Mike Hartman. Tell us about his journey and what brought you to Headlocked Comic.
I've been a wrestling fan and a comic book fan my whole life, and I feel like nobody ever made a wrestling comic that, to me, did justice to wrestling. So I decided to make my own, and I came up with the story of Mike Hartman, who's a theater major in college who fell in love with wrestling sort of unexpectedly, and he quit school, and it's his journey through the wrestling business, starting from day zero. And so, while he's like sort of navigating the underbelly of the business, we're also examining the craft of wrestling as he learns it through his eyes, the eyes of a performance artist. And I felt like that was a way to tell the story to people who maybe weren't necessarily wrestling fans, wouldn't necessarily read a wrestling story, but, in the same way that there's people who don't watch boxing, but they can enjoy Rocky.
Right.
So you kind of hide the medicine in the food, and, maybe you can educate people a little bit.
So you've been at this for years, man. I mean, I remember meeting you in Baltimore, and I was just telling the listeners here, you had the 30-page trade back, the paperback, basically. It was a 30-page black and white at first, wasn't it?
No, we've always done color. But yeah, we started with floppies, and now we just do. I don't do floppies anymore. We just do sort of. We put out OGNs, original graphic novel. When we can. Usually we try to do at least once a year, and then we do some other side projects. So it's growing. I think this year we'll probably have more content out than normal, just because of the lack of travel, I guess. And I've been making some stuff for Pro Wrestling Crate, and it's been an interesting year. It's been a challenging year. I think everybody's trying to figure out how things are going to land, because whatever happens, it isn't going to be the same, and whoever sort of pivots the right way, I guess, will have an advantage over the people that are still trying to do things the way that they always did. I think given the nature of the way I do things, I'm still in a decent position, because I was never dependent on comic book stores. Comic Cons has been a hit for sure. But, we've got this book that we've just made, and it's getting funded, and, we're doing all right. And I've got a couple more projects in the works that other people are making, paying for me to produce. So I sort of think being outside of the traditional apparatus gives me a little bit of an advantage.
So that brings me to an obvious question, but one I think that people are interested in hearing. Typically by this time of year, you've got your calendar booked completely.
Sure.
I mean, I can send you a message and expect typically a response within a day or so, but normally during this time of year, I know not to mess with you because you're just overwhelmed. COVID-19 happens. WrestleMania is literally canceled from the biggest event of the year to the Performance Center, and this spreads out through professional wrestling all the way down to every indie show. And now to you, as the independent artist and creator, this had to have been really difficult to navigate at first. Can you kind of tell us what you did to kind of navigate in your way?
I mean, it's been difficult. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, right now I'd probably be in the middle of a six to eight show swing. And San Diego is obviously a big help for us. So this the Kickstarter that we're running now was originally slated for March, and I had 6 consecutive shows set up in March, leading right through to WrestleMania. Mm-hmm. All big shows, all hitters. So, unfortunately, part of it is just trying to understand, like, at the beginning, I probably should have just let the Kickstarter go when it went, but I didn't know that, you didn't know that the summer was going to get canceled. You just sort of, so much changes all the time. When I launched the Kickstarter, and, and then we got protests, and then there was, the speaking out movement in wrestling and in comics, and then the COVID spike happened again, and it's been it's been tough getting bandwidth. Obviously I don't think I could have picked a less opportune time to try to get people to look in my general direction, but it's tough, because things keep pivoting and things keep changing. Every show in March canceled to the summer, thinking that we would be through this in the summer, and then the summer, some of them canceled and rescheduled to November, and some of them were just like, screw it, we'll do it next year. And I don't know. Technically, I still have some shows on the books in October and November, but it's 3-4 months away. But it might as well be a decade in 2020 months. Mm-hmm. So it's tough. Like I said, I thankfully had secured a couple of things, a couple other gigs that have allowed me to stay busy. Most of them are headlocked or headlock adjacent, and that's allowed me to keep making content. I'm working on, I've got Volume 5 in the works after this, and the Pro Wrestling Trade collaborations that we've done. So it's, just reaching out to different people and trying to figure out, For me, like the shows were, my main method of distribution between Kickstarter and shows. And now that, I don't know what conventions are going to be, and I don't know if when they come back, if they're going to come back like they did, So, there's a lot of things to think about, Like how much, how, even if we get a vaccine, like how strong is that vaccine going to be? Are movie studios going to let their big names go to these conventions on the off chance that they might, lose them for a month? Movie studios don't let The Rock wrestle anymore because he hurt himself against John Cena.
Right.
And they cost that Hercules movie like $6 million in delays. So, is a movie studio going to let Dave Bautista do a Comic-Con? And, if the big names get pulled out of it, then does that affect attendance? Does that, do we have to spread the show floor out? Does that mean that there's less space? Does that mean there's less people? Does that make the shows cost more? So there's a lot of variables to consider, and nobody really knows how it's going to land. There was a show that ran in Huntsville 2 weeks ago, and the show floor was, very spread out, and the celebrities were kept on a whole other side of the convention floor, and I don't think it was very well attended, but it's, some people have tried to push through it and still run shows, and, lots of people have canceled, and you really don't know how it's going to shake out. So you just try to put yourself in the best position you can.
So, and here we are, we're now 26 hours as of this moment, 26 hours away from the end of your current campaign. Of course, this current campaign is Tales from the Road, and you've got a hell of a roster of talent that have contributed to this project. And, of course, the amazing talent of the art of Jerry the King Lawler. Tell us about this compilation, this anthology of Tales from the Road.
So, in Headlocked itself, is Mike Hartman's story, and everything is told from his perspective. So, in the grand scheme of the universe, you only really see a little bit. So the idea with Tales from the Road is that we would make these short stories and sort of build out corners of the universe and explore other places in the world. And it allows us a couple of things. It allows me to collaborate with some of my favorite wrestlers. It allows me to play in different genres. The stories are all different sorts of genres, and and it builds out a little bit of space for us to eventually play in. So, the story we did with Christian is about Canadian death tours, and so now if I decide I want to take Mike Hartman on a Canadian death tour, we've got a little bit of connective tissue there. The story we did with Dominic Dijakovic is a horror story. The story we did with Gangrel is about Bigfoot. The story we did with Taya is a secret agent story. So they're all different. The Mustafa Ali story is about representation. The MVP story is more of like an urban legend. And it gives you a variety of different stories. They're all about wrestling. We try to tie them all back into reality in some way, shape, or form. And, there's a couple of characters that I know in my heart I've already sort of planned things for Headlock down the road, and there's a couple of characters we might run into later on. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of characters, if people pay attention, they may recognize from the issues. So there's a lot to it. I feel like if you read Headlocked, you can enjoy it. But even if you've never touched anything we've done, like, you can pick up this book and enjoy it for what it is. It's a series of fun stories created by a bunch of wrestlers.
I always think about, like, the parts of the book that I really enjoy, and the ones that always crack me up is where Mike Hartman is taken under the wing of a veteran who takes him to a strip joint. and he's like, they're sitting there, and then he gets stiffed, and then the next night, and a few pages later, gets smashed over the head with a chair, which I thought the way it was depicted was almost completely 100% accurate in the way that it was depicted in the art and in the way the story plays out, and then of course how this veteran turns out to be a classic example of never meet your heroes kind of thing.
Sure. And it's funny too, because on some level, the main sort of the story itself is about the craft of wrestling and the the art of wrestling, and the sort of the heel of the story is essentially the wrestling business, which I think is the way that just about any art form is. I mean, you talk about Hollywood, everybody knows about the sort of the underbelly that exists in any form of entertainment. So the interesting thing to me is that most of the wrestlers I've met have been just total sweethearts and super, super wonderful, and really, really nice to me, and helpful and supportive. So it's funny that I'm telling this sort of, dark tale, I guess, but, and obviously, I mean, everybody's seen Dark Side of the Ring, so there's some stuff there. I guess there's some truth to it, but ultimately, like, my experience with actual wrestlers has been nothing but positive. So it's kind of funny.
Now, Mike, I think every time I've talked to you in the years that I've known you, I've always asked you this question, so I'm going to do it again because I have to. Is there any chance we see Headlocked either in animated or in real action form on television or in the movie?
We've always had people sniffing around. So you never know. We haven't pulled the trigger on anything yet. My sort of dream, I think, would be to make it like an adult animated cartoon type thing. I think ultimately, when we conceived Headlock, nobody was doing wrestling comics. Yeah. To this day, I don't think a lot of people do straight drama in comics other than what we're doing. I think most comics have some sort of genre element to them. And the wrestlers have been such a big part of it. Like, I think it would be really cool to be able to do like a late night cartoon and have the wrestlers do voices for it. Just to be another type of a series that's sort of, created by wrestlers, and built by wrestling. So that would be my sort of dream. But I mean, obviously, I'm open for anything as long as it works. For me personally, like, I want to, I want to keep making stories, and I don't want somebody to take control of my world, I guess, and be like, well, you can't do these things anymore. So, because at the end of the day, if it's, if all I do is make a cool comic book, I'm happy with that. So, because that's all I ever set out to do.
And I think that's a amazing thing about what you do is that you're able to reach so many people. And I mean, I mentioned it before you came on, how many people you connected with that we all know of, like CM Punk, Joe Thompson, people like that. But then there's the other factor of the wrestling fans that you meet in every convention that you've been to, and you even met Jesus at a San Diego Comic-Con one time.
I did indeed. I mean, there's no real way to prove that wasn't cosplay. So,
but I'm not saying that it was my brother. I'm just saying that he and Jesus have never been seen in the same room at the same time.
I mean, yeah, that's it's funny how the people that you meet at San Diego Comic-Con and the connections and stuff. Like one of my best friends is Steve Orlando, and we grew up in the same area code. And we went to the same college, and then we moved to the same city after college. All I'm older than he is. You know what I mean? Like he was sort of living my life 10 years after me, and we met at San Diego Comic-Con. Ed Luce, who does Wolfable Oath, I met him. He's from the town I grew up in, and I met him at San Diego Comic-Con. So, how long have I known you? I met your brother at San Diego Comic-Con. So it's funny. It's weird how, I don't know. It feels like this weird nexus of realities.
It is.
Where, anything can happen. You can just be at your booth and, random celebrities happen by, or, some creator, Leonard Maltin walks by our booth. We used to walk by our booth a bunch, and Marv Wolfman and what's that dude's name? John Landis.
Oh wow!
Just random. You just see these just random celebrities. Dennis Miller came by my booth the first year that we were at San Diego Comic-Con, and it's just he was just hanging out while his wife and daughter were looking at some booth, and he was just hanging out. And then it was just, at the time, we're still, we didn't have necessarily the following that we did in 2009. So, my booth isn't the attraction at that point that it was. So he's just kind of hanging out because it's chill, and I'm just there, just talking with Dennis Miller. And it's funny just how that stuff happens on a big scale, on a small scale. The friends that you make and the people that you meet. It's really it's a real wonderful little place. And it's funny, at 8:00 tonight would have been when the show ended, and I got hit with this profound wave of sadness just because that the show's over, and just, we sort of lost that, and we're not getting it back. So it just kind of reminded me of a lot of the things that we've lost this year. I guess ultimately just experiences and connections, and and that's the stuff that I sort of live for, is just being among my friends and being amongst creatives and just being inspired, and a lot of that makes the grind worth it. So.
And I think that it's easy to lose sight of things, especially when you have so much, and we've all seen it happen this year. COVID-19 just kicked us all right square in the balls. There's no other way to put it. It just is what it is.
For sure.
Well, Mike, you're always very generous with your time. I am so appreciative of everything you do. We love what you do. We are here to support you, man. And we've got you. We've got your information linked on for the Headlocked campaign, of course. We'll continue to update it to the .com for you. Real quick, before we head on out, I did want to ask you, for the folks that are into Pro Wrestling Tees and Pro Wrestling Crate, what are some of the contributions you've done with that?
So we some of the stories you'll find it collected in Tales from the Road. We did the story we did with Christian. We just finished a story with Taya. I did a story with Sergeant Slaughter. A story with Crime Time. We have a story in September with a very popular set of wrestlers who have a podcast.
Thank you.
That's Brian.
So
Brian's here too.
Yeah, I'm one of the co-hosts, and I like to let Stan do the interviews because I think too many people getting involved kind of makes it, a little crazy sometimes. So, but thank you for not spoiling this. I've been with Pro Wrestling Crate since I think crate number 3, and it's one of the highlights to get stuff like that in and pop that bad boy open and see what kind of goodies are in there.
We've got 2 more slated for the rest of the year, so so I think if you're sticking around, hopefully you'll dig them.
Oh yeah, because I just got done with Taya maybe a week ago, and it was kind of interesting, wrestler by day, secret agent by night feel. So
yeah, we were really happy. What we were shooting for was sort of like the old El Santo kind of B action movie kind of feel for it, and it was a lot of fun to do. And I definitely think it's something like Ty is so creative, and she's going to fashion school now, and she's so smart and driven, and like I would love to do more work with her just because she's such a joy to work with.
Well, and that's
cool.
That's the coolest part of everything that we end up seeing from you. I always feel like such a homer when I get you on here because I'm just a ridiculously huge fan of what you do. But the stuff that you are experiencing, even the negative stuff that you've had to deal with, is inspiring for guys like us because we get to see it from a whole different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I try to let everybody kind of see the journey. I guess I do think on some level it's interesting, and it's real easy to look at the highlights and be like, oh, this is so great. But I mean,
right.
I spent a lot of time in a car by myself. I spent a lot of time up in the middle of the night, staring at my computer, just trying to make, switching 2 words around back and forth to try to figure out how it sounds better dialogue wise. Sometimes, there's times where you have bad experiences where somebody, let you down, I guess, somebody that you're friends with or somebody that, you're tight with, whatnot. But I mean, by and large, my experiences have been great, and I've been really, really lucky. And so many people have been so good to me. And, I wouldn't trade my experience for anything. So I just like to share it with people because I do feel like on some level I'm lucky, and I do feel like a lot of people, when I was coming up, like there was no roadmap. There was nobody telling you how to do things, and I made all these mistakes because of it. So I feel like if there's people who are trying to break in to comics or sometimes wrestling, I have people occasionally reach out to me about wrestling schools and stuff, and I try to, direct them to the most reputable wrestling school in their area. And I have people that want to break into comics, and I try to talk to them about it, and give them advice. So, I just think it's helpful, I guess, if people, I guess make their journeys a little more open for people to understand.
Is there a guy that when you get a crazy idea in the middle of the night that you absolutely have to call or text first?
It's funny. It really depends on what the time is, because I've got West Coast friends, I've got East Coast friends. It's there's a small handful of people, and it really kind of depends on the timing. But I work overnights. I work from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So usually, if I'm at work and it's something seizes me in a weird time, it'll be a West Coast guy. But I've got a couple of West Coast guys that I'm tight with. So, Kevin Kleinrock, Jonathan Bowles, Kevin Gill, Mike Millerick. So they they might get it. You know, if it's early enough, I might send it to Steve because I've gotten him into wrestling now. So it's tough. You know, I mean, not tough. I mean, it's great to have so many people all over the place. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. I have more. I think I have more friends in most big cities than I have like in my town. So sort of the downside, I guess, of being a Rolling Stone.
Yeah, Rolling Stone gathers no moss, though. So if we're just
I've been gathering some moss this year.
Yeah. Well, you know what, man? I want to tell you again. I really appreciate your time tonight, your candor. I think that what you do is of immense proportions for fans like us, because we just get to see somebody that's truly a hardworking guy show some success, and to show that, hey, you can take an idea from beginning to end and see it through, and it can turn out successful. Not a guarantee, but that it can happen, and I think it's inspiring for a lot of people.
And I like for people to see that. You know, I do a lot of panels about breaking into comics and how to get started and stuff, and I always tell people, I'm like, listen, this is what my life is like, and probably 95% of you didn't know who I was when you sat down for this panel. Mm-hmm. So that's how hard I work to be unknown. And that's and that's kind of the thing, you know. I mean, there's tons of people out there that are busting their humps to make their dreams happen, and it's not a thing that you can do passively, you know what I mean? But if you want to go all in, there's no limit to what you can accomplish.
Well, as you get closer to the end of these campaigns, I know it gets like almost like a breakneck pace, and you have emotional highs and lows. So we wish nothing but the best in the success that you have had to continue. If you want to go ahead and just, this would be a perfect time for you to drop any last-minute stats or info. We can certainly do that and pass it along to our fans.
We're really hoping to. We got 26 hours left. We're really hoping to get to 450 backers. We have a stretch goal at 450 backers where everybody gets their choice of one of our 10 most popular art prints. And I'd like to give people some cool stuff. We're at 392 right now. So it's tricky, you know. We had a couple of cancellations today. Like, people can drop in and out, so it's one of the more frustrating parts about Kickstarter. But we're going to make our final push here in the last 24 hours and see if we can get there.
Well, thank you again for your time tonight, and we will continue, of course, to help push the book as always. Mike, you're a hero, dude. I don't care what anybody tells you. You are.
I appreciate that, my friend.
No problem. Folks, that's Michael Kingston with Headlocked Comic. This guy has got 26 hours left in his campaign for Headlocked Comic, and you can throw some ducats his way. Click on the link on the website. It's just under the chat room. You'll see it's under where we says Proud Partners. You got the little blurb about the book, a little blurb about what is Headlocked. Click on the image, go to the link for Kickstarter, and throw some ducats his way. I think he's the hardest working guy in comic books.
Well, look, so I think, too, we should be remiss to make sure we pitch this out to our international listeners.
Indeed.
Who may not have ever heard of this, but it has been around for a very long time. I know the Pro Wrestling Crate Tales from the Roads are very entertaining to read. So if you're listening, like Stan said, get involved, help them out. Let's make sure we keep this thing rolling.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Yep.
Not a problem. Mike, you have a great night, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
You too.
All right.
Uh-huh.
Again, ladies and gentlemen, that was Michael Kingston, Headlocked Comic. You know, I love reading his books. I think my favorite thing that I've gotten from his stretch goals is my Headlocked hoodie. And then, of course, there's, hey, if you've ever looked at our logo, I mean, hello.
Bam.
Like, that's my favorite thing, right?
Isn't that interesting?
Hey, I'm not ashamed to admit that I will gladly pay for good art.
Hey, you know, but it should go to show the listeners, right? So what this company and this and Mike and everybody involved are about. So you've been going on about meeting him since Baltimore, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Forgive me on the year. I don't remember the year. It's been a long time. But you've met him. You've talked to him. You've always been high on him. We got a logo, which, is one of a kind, unless somebody demands extra prints or something. Maybe they want to see the muscle bound stand and, all that good stuff. And
the guns, suns out, guns out.
Muscles. But yeah, once again, the comic's been out for a very long time. It is hard to do what he's done, and sometimes, especially in a situation like this, if you're familiar with it, maybe, and you haven't read it in a while, maybe it's a good time to get back into it. If you're somebody who's never heard of it before, look it up. There's plenty of material to read. For you international listeners, if you've never, ever, ever heard of it before, and there's a good chance, feel free, check them out. It's on the page. We've got it linked. You can just go through us, and bam, there he is. And let's keep getting these issues going.
Yeah, I mean, the coolest things that we find out through wrestling, through the interviews that we've done over the years, is that some of these guys, hey, we've dealt with some guys that were complete jerks. We have. But we have also dealt with some phenomenally hardworking people. And, when I met him, it was like, damn, there's this guy who just put together a wrestling comic. Like, the only comic we had to look at for wrestling back then was the one done by Marvel Comics. And
well, no, you had the WWE ones.
Yeah.
Remember, they were very short-lived.
Yeah, the one-offs that they did. And you never found really anything that would satiate that need, that appetite for actual wrestling comics, something that kind of explored a storyline, something that just expanded upon what we already love. And that's what Headlocked did. And the coolest part was it was just a normal guy. It was just an everyday guy that was putting together good work, and it was super easy to get in touch with him. Like, he was so responsive to his fans, to his readers. And I really believe that that's what has made his success, is because he's so responsive to his people. He doesn't turn his back on his fans. He doesn't turn his back on those that support him. And I think that's awesome.
It is it is kind of a shame, because I didn't realize it until he mentioned it, that this past week would have been San Diego Comic-Con, and that's got to be hurting not just him but a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of
in the business, out of the business, fans, the whole kit and caboodle. I'd never been to San Diego, but that's where I always wanted to go. Because me, I do toys, I do comics, I do video games, the whole 9 yards, and that 1 week I can scratch every itch in the world. But yeah, so it's just goes to show you how the turn of a drop of a dime, the world can change, and something you're so used to seeing or being a part of can be taken from you.
Well, and that's what's so crazy. Like, I felt bad, because when I asked him about how he was handling COVID, because that's kind of the question, right, that everybody's going to ask. You could hear just the disappointment in his voice as he was describing it, and I was like, damn, I just kicked my one of my favorite artists when he was down. I'm like, damn it, I didn't mean to do that at all. But the reality is that's where we get our fix for DC Comics movies, Marvel Comics movies. All the cool toys that are coming out. And it's where we normally would find out about, like, the retros that I talk so much about. And those are the things that maybe you got a glimpse of over the past few days, but it's nothing close to how it used to be. I mean, it is disheartening. I guess that's a great way of putting it, because it is. I can only imagine how tough it is for him and for other artists like him.
Yeah, but I guess being I like to describe myself as a geek and not a nerd. You know, just for that little piece of nerd in you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you see things on the internet you don't really realize until somebody just kind of like snaps you back to reality, you know, because like this past week I'd have been watching just ungodly amount of hours worth of, you know, new toys, video game trailers, movie trailers. You know, if I could have found, you know, the little panels online or something, I'd have been watching panels. You know, I'd have just been doing so much. There was, you know, I think Sci-Fi or a couple other shows actually broadcast from there. And, you know, there's interviews, there's all types of stuff. And, you know, again, it's, you know, football hit me, baseball hit me, you know, all this other stuff, wrestling, not having wrestling, not being able to commentate wrestling shows, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, God.
And now here's just another one that's, you know, bam, there it is.
Well, and blame COVID for me having a Grizzly Adams beard, okay? You just let's be real.
Well, I think you probably had one for a while. It's just you might have taken more time to like comb it a little bit, because you always had that one piece that kind of went in a different direction. And I don't know if you had like a calic or something, and nobody would tell you.
For the longest time,
nobody's going to tell you.
Yeah.
It just kind of went like sideways, you know. So.
And that's the thing, like, I did notice that, by the way, over time. And I did notice you jerks that wouldn't tell me. There's a lot of other words I would use, but there could be youngsters. But, you know, the truth of the matter is, like, it's weird because all of the things that we would normally be doing right now, this time of year, like this time of year, we would have probably had 2 shows under our belt over at UCW. And we would have been planning on our fall schedule, and our fair schedule would have been running strong. And we would be getting ready for the big payoff in Dinwiddie. You know, and I know that we've talked to Mr. Devois, and
that
guy.
guy.
Come on. He's not that bad. He's not that bad.
Hey. Next time.
He did fire us, though.
Well, yeah, and he made me walk away. That guy.
Come on. He felt, I'll be real with you. He felt like such a schmuck when that happened.
So he just better not come back on my show and try it again.
So we're going to play Inside Baseball for a second. I got so many texts and calls from the dude, what happened? What do I do? I'm like, bro, you just got to let it. Because he doesn't know you like we know you, right? So I'm like, dude, just let it go. It'll be all right, man. I'm like, he's fine. I said, but, we all get hyped up. I'm like, you got to remember that when you're talking about the thing you love, it's going to play out. I said, but it'll be cool. But, yeah, every day. Dude, what do I do? Nothing, man. Nothing. Because it's a hard lesson to learn. It is. I understand. Rob and I know. We're like, let it breathe. Let it breathe. But, I mean, the reality is, we love what we do so much. I mean, Brian knows. I have talked about for years, all right, guys, maybe we should just wrap it up. Maybe we should stop. Not because I don't love doing it, but because it felt repetitive. And every year, anytime we've had the conversation, it's either you or Rob that's like, no, why would we do that? Let's just do this. Let's just do that. And it would change up. We'd be great. And if things would go fine. But then there'd be points where we'd be like, oh, geez, what the F? What just happened? And we would all be grumbling and all that. But it passes, But it's because we have such a... Is it an addiction now? Can we call it what it is now?
Well, no. So I don't think it's an addiction, right? So I think we're long past the addiction phase, right? So, I think when we were kids and we were watching this, it was an addiction, right? When you would go to school and you'd be ridiculed about how it was the F word.
You were ridiculed.
Dare I say it, right? But you still had that group of friends, right? So,
yep.
Like for me, I was into sports, so I was a jock, right? So when you come into school, me and my jock friends, we were, like up in the front of the hall and, greeting people we know and, all this stuff. And then, you had the preppy friends, you had, all these other friends. But if you were, and anybody that was a true wrestling fan back in junior high and high school, know that there was a select group that you would all be in one class together, and all you would do that whole class, you would talk about wrestling.
Yep.
Right? And that's what like connected you with completely different people, right? Because it wrestling is one of these things where it doesn't matter your race. Nowadays, it doesn't matter your gender. It doesn't matter your sexuality. It doesn't matter your nationality. It doesn't matter any. If you're a fan, you're a fan.
Exactly.
And it can truly bring you and connect you with people that you may not otherwise associate with, right? And it was so fun. I believe the class was, I think it was an English class. I'm pretty sure it was an English class. But it was me and about 3 other guys. And we just sat in this little, square. And we would discuss wrestling while this stupid English class was going on. And for that period, because I think this was about the only period that it happened, right, that I remember. It was that period, and we just connected on this crazy level. And much like me, you, and Rob do sometimes, where we just go on and on and on ad nauseum about wrestling. That's what we did. And you remember Kevin Gales.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Hey.
Former NWA Tag Team Champion, right?
Damn right.
Right?
Yeah.
This is the guy that I'm talking about. We would sit in this. It was either English or math, right? So I'm 47, almost 48, and my memory's sliding. But it was me and him and 2 other people. We would sit there and we would just talk wrestling. We would bring in the magazines and we would read the we'd talk about the figures on the back, the black card figures.
Yep.
And that's what's cool about this. But it's just, God, I need to get, that's what, when me and, do I have to say it?
Mr. DeVore.
Mr. DeVore. That's the passion that, that came out. And that's what, some people were probably like, what are these two? What are they doing?
Yeah.
But if you have that passion, not only is Dave a boss at times, but he's a really good friend.
Yeah.
Mr. DeVore, I guess I should say.
It's him, DeVore.
So, but he's a confidant. We've shared the road together. We have tales together. And it's just one of those things. Sometimes when 2 people are very passionate about something and they have opposing opinions, bam, it's oil and water, and you just somebody's got to walk away.
And it happens. You know what, though? That is, God damn it, that's not what I love about what we do. I don't mind having those moments as long as the payoff is, God damn, that was crazy. And then when you come back to it, it's,
Listen, so let's not, because you know me, and Rob knows me, and you both know, because we've had our spats before.
Oh, definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
And we had one that went on for a little bit longer than it probably should have.
Yeah.
But I made sure to prove a point. And if the boss man doesn't think there may not be some retribution in the future.
Oh, no.
he might be a little crazy.
Oof.
You know what I'm saying?
Wait. So let me get this right. This passion, this energy, this aggravation, some would say, is going to have. Are you telling me this is a build up to a payoff?
No, I'm just telling you.
There's retribution.
Somewhere down the line, when he's not expecting it, I might crush his hamburger. You know what I'm saying? I might put salt on his salad. You know what I'm saying?
Do you want to open Pandora's box that way?
I might double lace up both of his shoes so he can't.
You're talking about one of the experts of the ribbing business. Are you sure you want to go down that road?
Hey, I can do it too. It's not hard. It's not hard. I may not be as good, but hey, if he's not looking and his salad starts to taste salty, you might know where it comes from.
You got to be ashamed of yourself. Talking about revenge.
Or I could get the midget stripper. We're on the other side of the class, so all you can do is look.
Oh no. You'd probably call the SWAT team on him, wouldn't you? You'd call SWAT.
No.
You'd swat him out.
No, I wouldn't swat him out. So growing up though, when we would go over to an aunt's house or whatever, a relative's house, my mom was known for playing pranks. All right. I know about the saran wrap across the toilet. Okay. I know about short sheet in beds.
Oh, wow.
I know about rice in beds.
Wow.
I got a lot of them. I'm just saying.
Well, there's a lot of passion behind your words. A lot of
somewhere
vitriol.
down the line, he may regret what happened.
Crossing the Taylor.
Crossing. Yes.
Wow. It's funny. You were talking about, back when you were in high school and you and Kevin would talk about wrestling and go over the mags and all that. It reminded me when I first met Rob and I hated each other in high school. True story. My first day in Culpeper County, which is where I went to school, my first day, we're walking through the halls and we passed the band room. And I started making fun of people in the band. And my mom is with me, and she's laughing and giggling because I'm like, oh, look at these losers. And, I mean, I had no idea that Rob was in the band. I had no idea who was walking with us or giving us the tour. Because you remember, the high school used to do the tour for all incoming sophomores. And then less than 2 weeks later, Rob and I are instant best friends because here we are both talking about pro wrestling.
Yeah.
I just happened to hear him talk about, I think he said something about Sergeant Slaughter, and I made a joke, and all of a sudden, boom, the switch flipped. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that's the joy about this. And back then, I would say you hit it more, right?
Yeah.
So, you kind of just like hid in the closet a little bit more, because you were ridiculed more back in the 80s,
mm-hmm.
right? Than you were in probably the late 90s, and then of course, going forward. And you were lucky because, see, unlike the other sports, wrestling was year round,
mm-hmm.
right? So I grew up in Richmond. I grew up in Highland Springs, which is a suburb of Richmond, maybe 15 minutes from the city, 20 at the most. We had the Richmond Coliseum. So back then, it was more of for those that don't know, a territorial
mm-hmm.
type, thing. So we had Jim Crockett Promotions, which was the big NWA banner. And they would run down through the Mid-Atlantic region, which went from Virginia down to Georgia, all right, if I remember right. And they would just make loops. So, again, back then it was territory. And a company, especially a regional style company, would make loops, right, around this territory. So you could almost count on shows being somewhere near you for 1 or 2 nights every so many months. All right. So you might be in, Norfolk on Friday night. You might be in Richmond Saturday night. You might be in, somewhere up north, maybe Sunday night or Sunday afternoon. And then the loop would just go down and come back up. Right. That's how it was in the early 80s to mid 80s, before Ted Turner and them got involved. And, it was nice when you could find somebody that would, you could hop in the car with and go to, Richmond. And of course I live in Culpeper. Richmond is about an hour and a half from here, 2 hours depending on traffic or more. And, of course my mom, she wouldn't take me. My dad would take me every once in a while. And, if the weekend was right that I was staying with them. But, once you get older and you get to that driving age and, again, people you may not even expect to be wrestling fans, because nobody's wearing the shirts.
Right.
Not
There's
like
no
today.
Hulkamania T-shirts getting flaunted about.
Yeah, unlike the sports shirts, football and baseball and all that stuff, you don't have, you're not running around with a Horseman shirt. You might see one maybe every 6 months at the school, if somebody just happens to bust it out. But, when you find these people that you can really connect with about this stuff to the point where you're fanatic. Right, because I don't know what it is. So you either are diehard, right, or you're not.
Yeah, there's no middle ground. You're either in or out. That's it.
Yeah, and again, you would just connect. You would find people and you'd start talking, and you'd talk about Saturday night. 605 TBS, NWA, Jim Crockett was big, or you would talk about the Monday night show with the WWE.
Primetime wrestling.
Primetime, yeah. So you would talk about that, and it was just crazy. It was almost again like you would huddle around each other for protection, and then eventually. Yeah, and then eventually, you get older, and you find more people, and back then there was no social media, there were no Facebook groups for this crap, and I'm going to Richmond this weekend. You want to go? Sure, let's go. I'll do the whole. I'm going to tell my mom I'm staying over at somebody's house. What did you hit? And, that was me, sorry. Had a little music come through. But yeah, so you would tell her, I'm staying over at somebody's house, and her being a lot smarter than you would be like, well, don't you be going to Richmond? Oh, no, that's not happening.
No.
We're staying right here in Culpeper.
Wouldn't dream of it.
Only to go to Richmond and meet Bill Abner and, watch, a 4 or 5 hour NWA show. And, that's just what you did back then. It was different.
I think the coolest parts was finding new channels that wrestling would come on. So when I was in Maryland, you had the Baltimore station. So it was WWF, WCW, NWA. But you had the Power Hour, NWA Pro, Worldwide, the Main Event, and then you had Primetime Wrestling, Wrestling Spotlight, Wrestling Challenge, and Wrestling Superstars. And that was just scratching the surface. So then you go from Maryland to Virginia, to Culpeper, where I moved to for high school, and there was nothing. So when I would, you remember the dial back in the day where you could just change the dial up, tune in a channel. You might just have that day where you'd get the luck of the draw and be able to see spotlight, and it was an hour's worth of just matches dedicated to individual performers. Or it was, you'd get the Clash of the Champions, and you'd actually get to see, Sting and Ric Flair and the Great Muta. I mean, that was back when, you really could... That was honestly, I think that was the coolest time because you could just get into it. And it was just like you were discovering something brand new, even if you've seen it before.
Did you not have cable when you got here to Culpeper?
So when I was in Maryland, we did. And that's how I saw a lot of what I did. But then when I got to Culpeper, we didn't have it for a year. So I would see, whatever was on the Fox affiliate. And then I would see, we didn't have, so I would see if, we had the basic cable package. So Global, of course, ends as I'm moving into an area that actually airs Global. So that was a depressing thing because I was a huge Patriot fan back then. But, I would miss all the Clash of Champions. I would miss, and I would write. I wrote for a newsletter, and I would send my stuff to the guy, and I couldn't write for him because I didn't have anything that I could write about. Because all I saw was stuff that everybody had already saw.
Did you not have ESPN?
Not until second half of my sophomore year in high school.
Holy ESPN was the absolute dream.
Oh yeah,
when I was growing up.
Yeah.
So when I was in Richmond, right, in Highland Springs, right, so my wrestling, and we had cable, but my wrestling consisted straight of Jim Crockett Promotions, right? So it was channel CBS, right, the local CBS affiliate, would run an NWA show somewhere, depending on the hour, from in between 10 to 12 in the afternoon, right? So, again, the hours would switch every once in a while, but you could always count on 1 hour segment there, right? And then you would have something on in the afternoon, and it would probably be the TBS. And then at night, and this was the really cool one, you would have CBS would air a different NWA show, Jim Crockett Promotions, at night after the news. So you would start, again, the hours would change every once in a while. So it might be 11:30 to 12:30. It might be 12 to 1. It might be 12:30 to 1:30. So the hours would switch every once in a while. So, literally, you would sit there and be like, how am I going to stay up tonight? Because the cool thing about that, and this was the first time that it actually, you would understand storyline, right? Because you would get a story that would take place in the morning, right? And then a lot of times it would then carry over into that night show, right? The late night show. So like the Rock and Roll Express, right? So what I remember, and again, I could be wrong just based off of the years, but I remember them advertising the Rock and Roll Express as coming in on an 11 o'clock or, early morning show or afternoon show, right? So the Rock and Roll Express are coming in, they show you a clip. I'm pretty sure they showed a clip of, how good they are. And then that very night, they have a match with the Russians and they take the titles. And that's how I remember it. Now, again, I could be wrong, but I mean, that's how cool the NWA was to me, because you would get something in the morning and then it may transpire at night. And normally the night shows, after the midnight shows, most of the time, that's where you got the really good stuff. So you would get the cage matches, you would get the bleeding, you would you would get the serious beatdowns, and it's almost like they knew what they were doing, and that's how they filmed it, and that's how they packaged it, and that's how they put it up. But then I didn't get into the WWE until I moved to Culpeper, right? So I think I was 12 when I first learned about the WWE. And I guess when I was in Richmond, maybe the cable didn't have the USA Network, and I don't remember seeing anything on ESPN there either. So I don't even know if ESPN was around when we were in Richmond. But anyway, so we moved to Culpeper, and that's where I pick up the WWE stuff. Right now, again, my first love is always going to be Jim Crockett Promotions. Right. But I start to learn about the up north, the way the people up there. Now, I'd always been a fan of the magazine, so I would read these articles and be like, who is this? Right? And so I would learn about these guys through these articles, right? In Pro Wrestling Illustrated, or what was it, The Wrestler.
The Wrestling
I think there was
Review.
The
Inside Wrestling.
Maybe it was Inside. There were like 3 really big ones that I remember. Yeah, and I would buy PWI almost religiously, and then the other 2 based on the cover article or the cover. What article I would buy. I might pick up a second one. So I was familiar with them, but I'd never seen them wrestle because back then, the stuff you read didn't have moving pictures.
Right.
Right. Lucky y'all. But
yeah, right. Bunch of entitled geeks.
Nerds.
Nerds.
And so somewhere along the way, I found ESPN. And ESPN, probably more than any other channel, hooked me to wrestling. Right? So now again, I guess I gotta explain myself here. So with the NWA, I'd have 4 or 5 hours worth of programming once a week, right, on Saturdays, that I would watch religiously. If I was outside, I would come inside. I wouldn't go to. I'd try my best not to fall asleep. If I was at my dad's house, because mom and dad were divorced, we would stop whatever we were doing, and we were always in there. We were watching it together, right? So there's familial stuff with the NWA, right? And then again with the WWE, it's a different style of show, and you got Hogan and all this other stuff that I didn't really get into, right? Even though I knew who some of these guys were, just watching, because even back then they would leave the NWA, go up north, or vice versa. But with the ESPN, it taught me, I guess, more about wrestling because it broadened my horizon on a level neither of the other 2 did, right? Because with ESPN, I had the AWA, right? Now, the AWA was up north in Minnesota, right? I think it was based out of Minnesota, if I remember. But with them, I got to watch the Road Warriors take off. I got to watch Nick Bockwinkel. I got to watch, all these other guys, a young Kurt Hennig, the Ganyas, you just got to see, all this different style, right, than the North and Jim Crockett. And then you had, World Class, right, out of Texas. And for everything everybody else was doing on ESPN, World Class really knew how to put on a show. And it's almost a shame what happened to it, because they I think really could have been a major national contender.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that stuff with the Von Erichs and the Freebirds is the stuff of legends, and I'm glad I got to see it. And, they had great ones too.
Mm-hmm.
You had a young Austin, you had a young Hall, you had Chris Adams in his prime. You had like Iceman King Parsons, you had all these other great people that you wouldn't seen if not for something like ESPN. What was it? USWA.
Mm-hmm.
Was that it?
Jerry Lawler.
Yeah, and the whole thing, like there's certain storylines I remember with like Lawler in the cage.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget who he was wrestling, where if you got pinned or something, you had to be handcuffed to the cage for whatever the time limit was, and your opponent could beat you up. And at the end, they trick him, and the guy's partner comes in, and they thump Jerry Lawler. And I don't know if it's true or not, but like the story was that he lost a testicle. They beat him so bad. It was like, what in the world? But you just saw so many great talent off of ESPN.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my absolute favorite thing to do, because it was Monday through Friday. It was right after school.
Yep,
so
3:30.
Yep. Forget hanging out. Forget whatever. I'm going home. I'm watching ESPN. I think the AWA at one time was on the riverboat.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, damn, I forgot.
Yeah.
Wow.
And again, look at all the talent, the young talent,
mm-hmm.
right, that you saw that eventually goes on to be the biggest superstars, 15, 20 years later.
Mm-hmm.
So again, Steve Austin. I remember the feud with him and his what was her name, Jeannie.
Yep.
On that it, Chris Adams' wife.
Oh, Lady Blossom. Yeah.
Yeah. That was crazy to watch. Scott Hall, Mark Callis, Sean Waltman. The list just goes on. Kurt Hennig.
Mm-hmm.
The list goes on and on of people you get to see. And some of them truly become legends. The Freebirds, the Road Warriors. There are so many that just become true, legitimate legends. And that's why ESPN, eventually was like I can't miss.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be home to watch ESPN.
Well, and that's funny because like I was, late 80s, early 90s, I had USA and all that stuff, so I would see both. And that's where I said I got a chance to switch back and forth and see the Power Hour and then see Spotlight and all that. But then I would go and stay with my folks, my mom and my grandparents in Culpeper, and all I had was Superstars. If my grandmother was nice enough to let me change the channel on a Saturday morning. That was a big if. And then as time goes by, and ultimately, we do get cable, but Rob had that big C-band satellite dish. And that dude,
mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how many days Rob and I would just hang out and watch wrestling until like 4 in the morning, because we would find such random stuff on the dish. And it was stuff like MSG Network and, all this stuff, but it's funny because, all the stuff we see now that we're like, what the hell, this doesn't work, like the eye for an eye match. Did we teleport to a time where people forget that, at one point in time it was a wrestling angle where Eddie Gilbert ran over Jerry Lawler with his car? Like, look, I'm not saying that the eye for an eye thing was a good concept. I don't think it was. I think it was stupid. But let's not forget that, for all the times that we've seen Asuka do the Green Mist, we saw it first with guys like, the great Kabuki and the great Muta.
Mm-hmm.
And it was cool back then, and it was dastardly back then. And for the people that sit there and they're like, oh, God, not that again. Okay, I think you're forgetting the point. It's supposed to be... There's supposed to be an element of fun to it, but there's also supposed to be something that happens that makes you go, good God, why did they do that? It's supposed to draw you in. It's supposed to make you angry or happy or sad, or whatever. And that's what, like you were talking about the Rock and Roll Express. Well, we talk a lot about when, Ricky Morton got his face just grinded into the ground. And they would later do that again during a storyline with the Dangerous Alliance. Do you remember the blowback that TBS got for that storyline, but they never heard squat for what happened with Ricky Morton?
No, I don't remember the Dangerous Alliance one. And speaking of, so we talk about the face crown with Ricky Morton.
Right.
And next time I run into him, I really got to commend him for this, because there are certain moments in wrestling that I literally will never forget.
Mm-hmm.
And this one is in my top 10, because I can remember as a child watching this and just being completely mortified.
Yeah.
Because, again, you watch it and you just, as you're going back and forth, you just start to see a little bit of red,
and
then there's a bigger patch of red, and then there's a bigger patch, and it's like, whoa, this is real. But then that leads to the nose piece, right? The face guard, right? And do you remember the incident where Flair puts the knee across the back of the head?
Mm-hmm.
And it almost, it's like that nose explodes.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably will not get anything like that now, but that's why, so we were talking about passion.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're right? So that's why I guess I'm so against the WWE product, because for a while they were the only thing there.
Yeah.
And they didn't do it for me on a level that I'm used to, right? Because again, like I said, I'll never forget those moments. I'll never forget Lawler in a cage.